before there were days and nights, before time even knew how to move, before a human being ever had the chance to ask, "Who am I?" There was a truth that should make anyone shiver if they dare to face it. The universe did not begin by accident. It began with a will, a decision, a spoken command strong enough to tear through the endless void and awaken everything out of nothingness. Pause for a moment and imagine it. No light, no direction, no sound, no concept of before or after. Only absolute silence. And then inside that silence, a voice speaks. Let there be light. Light does not only appear in the sky, it appears as order. From that moment, the universe is no longer an empty, meaningless space. It becomes a story being written layer by layer, day by day, breath by breath. God was not created. He is the source of all existence. When he formed the heavens, the earth, the oceans, and life itself, it was not an experiment. It was a design with purpose. And at the center of that design, he placed human beings, not as a random creature, but as a reflection of his own image. Humanity was given reason, freedom, and the ability to choose. Right there, the seeds of glory and tragedy were planted side by side. The Garden of Eden lacked nothing. But in the middle of abundance, a question began to grow inside the human heart. What if I could be like God? The fall did not begin with hunger. It began with ambition. Not with poverty, but with the craving to cross a boundary. When the forbidden fruit reached the lips, what humanity received was not power, but shame. Not freedom, but fear. And for the first time in history, human beings ran from the very one who gave them life. From that moment, the world was never the same. Harmony between humanity and God cracked. Harmony between human beings collapsed too. Cain no longer looked at his brother with the eyes of family, but with the eyes of comparison and jealousy. When the first stone fell, when the first blood sank into the ground, human history officially carried the mark of violence. The earth, created to multiply life, became the silent witness to the first crime. Time moved on, but evil did not disappear. It grew alongside humanity. The world became filled with violence, pride, and lawlessness. The Great Flood was not a story of blind destruction. It was the final boundary placed against a collapse that had gone unchecked. Even in judgment, God preserved a family, an ark, a rainbow. Mercy did not vanish, it simply hid behind justice. But people did not hold that lesson for long. When the waters receded, when the ground dried again, pride rose back up. The Tower of Babel was built not for worship, but for self-glory. Let us make a name for ourselves, they said, as if they could carve their own name into eternity. And once again, God intervened, not with lightning, but with scattering. Language was divided, people were separated, so evil could not unify into a single wave of global destruction. These are not just ancient stories, they are mirrors held up to us today. Every time people decide they do not need God, history repeats itself. And right at the darkest point, a question begins to echo quietly but relentlessly. If human beings cannot save themselves, who will? Welcome to Prophetic History Explained, where we do not just retell history, we uncover the meaning hidden beneath the events that shaped the world. If these questions feel like they are touching something real inside you, subscribe and walk with us. Your support is the fuel that helps us keep bringing deeper, stronger, more awakening videos in the episodes ahead. In a world already used to violence, division, and self-worship, God does not choose to start over through destruction. He chooses to begin with a call. Not the call of an empire, not the call of a hero, but the call of an ordinary man living among ancient civilizations. Abram, no lightning, no crowd watching, only a quiet command strong enough to change history. Leave your homeland, leave what is familiar, and go to the place I will show you. What is astonishing is not the promise, but the response. Abram is not given a map. He is not promised safety. He is not guaranteed success. He has only a future he cannot see and a call that demands he release the present. And he goes. That is the first moment faith is carved into history. Trusting before you see, walking before you understand. From that moment on, the story of salvation is no longer abstract. It becomes a journey that is concrete, human, and costly. The promise given to Abraham is bigger than his lifetime. Descendants as countless as the stars, a land to inherit, and deeper than all of that. Through him, every nation on earth will be blessed. But the promise does not unfold in a straight line. It passes through detours of doubt, disappointment, and wrong decisions. Time passes. Old age draws close. The promised child still does not appear. In exhausted waiting, people reach for shortcuts. Hagar enters the story. Ishmael is born. Not from cruelty, but from impatience in a faith that has not fully matured. God does not cancel the promise because of human failure. He shapes the heart with patience. And then, when every natural hope is gone, Isaac is born. Laughter fills a house that once held only tears. The promise arrives not on the schedule people plan, but in God's timing. From there, the story flows through Isaac, then Jacob, a man full of schemes but constantly being changed through wrestling with himself and with God. The chosen family is not an ideal family. It is filled with rivalry, deception, and wounds. Inside that family, Joseph appears like a fragile light. His dreams do not bring comfort. They ignite envy. Sold like a slave, betrayed by his own brothers, Joseph enters Egypt not as someone blessed, but as someone discarded. But what people cannot see, God is still quietly working out. Egypt does not erase Joseph's faith. It tests it and purifies it. From the bottom of a dark prison to a position of authority, Joseph learns a lesson few people have the patience to learn. God is not rushed. Every year of being forgotten, every moment of being misunderstood is laying a foundation for something bigger. When famine spreads across the land, the one who was rejected becomes the instrument that preserves an entire people. The reunion between Joseph and his brothers is not just an emotional family scene. It is a turning point in salvation history. Power now sits in the hands of the one who was wounded. Revenge would be the easy choice. But Joseph chooses a different path. He looks back on his life not through bitterness, but through a vision shaped by faith. What they intended for evil, God used to bring life. Those words do not only free the brothers, they free Joseph himself from the chains of the past. Jacob's family goes down into Egypt not to lose identity, but to be preserved. 70 people enter a foreign land carrying an ancient promise that is still unfinished. They are not yet a great nation. They do not yet possess the promised land. But they carry something more important: the memory of a faithful God, a God who does not abandon his plan even when people keep drifting. This part of the story reveals something profound. God does not build salvation on human perfection. He builds it on his own faithfulness. The road of promise does not avoid suffering, but it is never cut off. And through events that look disconnected, an unseen current keeps flowing, pushing history forward toward a fuller answer that is still waiting to be revealed. When the cries of an oppressed people rise into the sky, God does not ignore them. 400 years of slavery had worn down Israel's memory of freedom, but it never erased the memory of promise. In that setting, God intervenes not through an abstract idea, but through action that is concrete, powerful, and shaking. The Exodus is not simply migration. It is a declaration that no power, no matter how mighty, can take the place of God in history. The sea opening before them is not only an escape route, it is the final line between past and future. With walls of water on both sides, Israel walks forward in fear and wonder. But miracles do not erase fear inside the human heart. Only days after singing songs of victory, they begin to complain. Freedom arrives faster than they can understand how to live inside it. And that is the first paradox. Released from outer chains, but still carrying slavery within. The law given on Mount Sinai is not meant to imprison, but to guide. It is the framework for a new life, a new people. But the law also exposes a hard truth. People can know the good and still lack the strength to live it fully. While Moses is still on the mountain, the people build a golden calf. Not because they do not know who God is, but because they cannot handle waiting. They want a God they can see, control, and shape around their fear. The wilderness journey is long not because God is lost, but because people need time to face themselves. Every complaint, every rebellion, every turning away exposes the same truth. Miracles do not automatically transform the heart. People can watch water burst from rock and bread fall from the sky and still doubt when asked to trust for tomorrow. The desert becomes a place of refining where the truth about the heart has nowhere left to hide. When that generation passes, Joshua leads the people into the promised land. The walls of Jericho fall not because of military strategy, but because of obedience that seems unreasonable. But victory does not last forever. The era of the judges opens a weary cycle, falling, oppression, crying out, rescue, then falling again. With no king and no center, everyone does what seems right in their own eyes. Freedom without truth becomes chaos. The desire for a king rises not only from a need for structure, but from the craving to be like the nations around them. Saul is chosen as the answer to that desire. At first, he is humble and courageous, but power quickly reveals what was hidden inside him, fear of losing control. When Saul places his own will above God's command, he loses the most essential thing. The throne is not taken from him immediately, but it becomes hollow from the inside out. Then David appears as another paradox, chosen not for size or status, but for the heart. He defeats the enemy outside through faith, but he collapses before the enemy within through desire. David's story is not told to hide failure, but to expose a painful truth. Even the man called after God's heart can fall. The difference is not never sinning. The difference is returning. Solomon inherits the throne with unmatched wisdom and builds an era of prosperity like nothing before it. The temple rises in splendor as a symbol of God's presence among his people. But in abundance, the greatest danger appears. Solomon's heart drifts little by little through compromise. Idols do not arrive like an obvious enemy. They arrive as choices that do not seem that serious. And that is the tragedy. Collapse often begins with what looks small. This chapter of history closes with a heavy question hanging over the entire story. If the law is not enough, if even chosen leaders fail, if power and wisdom cannot keep people faithful, then where does hope live? The question is not answered immediately. But that dead end opens the way for something larger, deeper, beyond the human ability to rescue itself. And history keeps moving forward, carrying a quiet longing for a deliverance that does not just change circumstances, but transforms the heart at the root. When warnings are ignored for too long, history enters a phase that cannot be reversed. God patiently sends prophets not to threaten, but to wake the people up. They do not say what is easy to hear. They press directly on the wound of the nation. Idols built inside religious life, justice twisted to serve the powerful, covenant reduced to empty form. But instead of listening, people choose the comfort of a fake peace. And once truth is refused, judgment stops being a surprise. It becomes the inevitable consequence. The northern kingdom of Israel falls under the brutal force of Assyria. Strongholds are shattered. People are chained and dragged away like trophies. No dramatic escape, no miracle rescue. Only the heavy silence of a people once chosen, now forgetting the one who chose them. The northern kingdom disappears from the map, leaving behind a scar in history and a living warning for the land that remains in the south. Judah watches it all and still does not learn. Kings keep compromising, priests keep twisting the law. The people keep believing the temple will protect them no matter how they live. In that setting, the prophets' voices grow lonelier. Jeremiah weeps for a city that will not listen. He speaks of exile while people are still throwing festivals. He speaks of collapse while everyone insists peace is guaranteed. When Babylon comes, doubt disappears. Jerusalem is surrounded, hunger grinds down the will. Then the walls fall. The temple, symbol of God's presence, is burned. Kings are humiliated, people are led away in chains. Exile is not only losing land, it is losing identity. With no king, no temple, no sacrifices, a painful question rises in the heart of the people. Is God still with us? And inside that question, something unexpected happens. God does not vanish. He is not limited by borders or buildings. In the heart of Babylon, among towering idols and human power on display, faith does not die. Daniel stands firm in a foreign court. 3 young men walk through fire without being consumed. A quiet but forceful declaration echoes. Even in exile, God is still Lord of history. Not everyone witnesses miracles. Most people live with exhaustion, nostalgia, and fragile hope, but in the foreign land, Scripture begins to be written down. Covenant memory is preserved and longing is purified. Exile, strangely enough, becomes the place where faith is refined, stripped of hollow form. People stop clinging to ritual alone and cling to promise. 70 years pass. And then, in a single night, an empire that looks unstoppable collapses. Cyrus of Persia steps onto the stage not only as a conqueror but as an instrument in a plan larger than himself. A decree of return is issued. The people go home not in glory but in tears. The city is rubble, the temple is ash-stained foundations. But they begin again. Stone by stone, not only with hands but with faith. Zerubbabel rebuilds the temple while Nehemiah rebuilds the walls under mockery and threat. The work moves slowly, painfully, but steadily. This time they understand the greatest danger is not outside enemies, but inner faithfulness. The covenant is read aloud again. Tears fall. A new generation commits to live differently. And still, even after the walls are finished, something feels incomplete. Something is missing. The prophets grow quiet. Heaven seems silent. One empire replaces another. Persia gives way to Greece. Greece gives way to Rome. The people keep living under foreign rule. The temple stands again. The law remains. But the promise still feels unfinished. A deep expectation spreads quietly. Is there something greater than the temple, greater than return? The silent years are not proof of abandonment. They are preparation. Like the moment before dawn breaks, darkness becomes strangely still. History looks frozen, but it is gathering momentum. Judgment has passed. Exile is ended, but the story is not closed. Instead, everything seems to be preparing for a turning point unlike anything before, where humanity's biggest question will be answered not through power, but through presence. When the silence drags on so long it starts to feel permanent, something happens that no one expects. Not an army, not a throne, but a child is born in poverty and quiet. No victory torches, no trumpet blasts, only the weak breath of an infant. And yet from that moment, the axis of history shifts without announcement. All the promises, hopes, failures, and longings gathered over thousands of years begin to converge in one person. Jesus enters the world not the way people expected. He does not arrive to overthrow empires by violence. He does not come to reinforce a familiar religious system. He comes to expose what is deepest inside the human heart. His words do not flatter crowds. They pierce the conscience. His actions do not perform power for show. They restore dignity. The blind see. The lame walk. The rejected are named and welcomed. And at the same time, the ones convinced of their own righteousness begin to feel threatened. His true power is not in the miracles, it is in his presence. He touches what law alone cannot heal. He forgives where society only condemns. And the contrast grows sharper with time. On one side, a kingdom built on humility and service. On the other, power structures built on control and fear. That conflict cannot be avoided. The cross is not an accident in history, it is the peak of that collision. When he is lifted between heaven and earth, hope seems to collapse. The one called Messiah dies like someone cursed. The disciples scatter. Silence returns, heavier than ever. But in the moment that looks like complete defeat, what human logic says cannot happen is completed. Death is entered to its deepest point. Violence exposes its own emptiness. And life is planted not through force, but through self-giving love. The resurrection is not only a miraculous event, it is the strongest declaration ever spoken into history. Death does not get the final word. When the empty tomb is revealed, history does not reset. It moves into an entirely new chapter. The disciples' fear becomes mission. Faith is no longer a memory of a teacher who died. It becomes living experience of a Lord who lives. The church is born not in safety but in trembling, not protected by law, not supported by political power, only the Holy Spirit and testimony. And that is exactly what makes the early church strong. When threatened, they do not fall silent. When persecuted, they do not answer with violence. The blood of witnesses does not extinguish faith. It spreads it farther. The gospel crosses the boundaries of one nation and reaches lands that never knew the God of Israel. History seems to repeat the old cycle when the Roman Empire rises with overwhelming force. Jerusalem falls, the temple is destroyed, and again people ask, does this story end in ash? But then the paradox appears. There is no longer a stone temple, yet people become a living temple. There is no longer a single geographic center, yet faith spreads everywhere. The church is not erased. It grows through trial. When the apostles die one by one, it feels like the flame should fade. And then a vision is given on the lonely island of Patmos. Revelation is not written to spread fear, but to give hope. It pulls back the curtain on history and shows that behind all chaos, another reality is at work. The beast, power, violence, and lies are not the ending. The Lamb is the center. And the final victory belongs not to oppressors, but to faithfulness. Revelation closes the Bible not with a full stop, but with an invitation. A new heaven and a new earth are not only images of a distant future. They are a declaration that history is moving toward meaning. What began in the light of creation will end in an even brighter light of complete restoration. And that story does not stop on the page. It continues in every generation. Every person stands before the same choice that has echoed since the beginning. Stay closed in fear, or step into relationship with the living God. Salvation history has been written with light, with blood, with tears, and with hope. And now it waits to be continued not by words, but by the lives of those who dare to believe the story, even after thousands of years, is not finished. The deepest lesson for us today is this. The biggest human problem is not circumstance, systems, or eras. It is the heart. When people try to save themselves through power, knowledge, or control, history repeats the same spiral of pride and collapse. But when people admit their limits, when they return to truth, a new path always opens. Living this out today means learning to slow down and listen, daring to re-examine choices that feel normal and asking the question, what is really guiding my life? Fear, ambition, or truth and love? Salvation history does not demand we become heroes. It invites us to be faithful in the small choices of everyday life. That is where the bigger story keeps getting written. If you want to go deeper into the meaning beneath biblical events, prophetic history, exile, redemption, and apocalypse, join the Prophetic History Explained community so we can explore, reflect, and wrestle with these foundational truths that are so often overlooked. And do not forget to subscribe to support Prophetic History Explained, so we can keep bringing content that is deep, awakening, and full of meaning in the videos ahead.